Cardin, you're next, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank all of our witnesses. What I really enjoy about this committee is that we really try to find the right balance, and I applaud our leaders in taking sensitive subjects and trying to find the sweet spot. And I think this is one of the areas that's going to be a challenge for us, but we have to work together. Permitting reform, we all want to see timely decisions made. But I'm going to raise two areas of concern that we don't cut the timing that would be detrimental to environmental justice or to our environmental commitments. Mr. Chairman, you asked for an example, so I want to start with Mr. Johnson with an example in Baltimore. In the 1970s, there was a desire to connect from our west I-70 to our east I-95 with a highway going through Baltimore. Before the African-American minority community could object to it, the highway was built, dividing a community and destroying stable black neighborhoods. It was stopped by a white community. With its political impact, the highway ultimately went to nowhere. Now, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, I'm proud that our Reconnecting Communities, that this community is going to get a grant. We're going to try to reconnect the community. My point is this: we can't sacrifice the desire for time that denies communities the opportunity to have input to stop these types of wrong decisions from being made. So, Mrs. Johnson, tell me how we can effectively have community input if we try to rush a process that denies particularly the underserved community from having that opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I don't think that we can have meaningful community input if we prioritize speed over quality. I think that if we front load the process with public engagement that begins before an EIS or an EA, an environmental assessment is done, before the project is even fully baked. If we have community at the table participating in conversations around what we ultimately hope to achieve, I think that we can get to great results. We have conversation, we have opportunity for negotiation, as was mentioned earlier, and we have opportunity to look for community benefits. We also have to consider that sometimes the answer might be no, and in those instances, we can work together to come up with a resolution that can be beneficial to everyone. But we think first, early, and continued connection to community when we are envisioning and planning out projects is important.
And I just want to give a plug to our committee. It was the leadership of our committee that included reconnecting communities in the infrastructure bill. So thank you for that. This community is going to get some help. Ms. Goldfuss, I want to relay the conversation I had with President Petro this past week of Colombia. He was telling us about the Amazon being the sponge for greenhouse gas emissions, and we're asking the countries of our hemisphere to preserve the Amazon because we know how important it is. And he raised to me the issue that the developed world has already destroyed a lot of its resources, and now you're asking the developing world to take a step to preserve the global climate issues. The point is this: when you do an environmental study, the impact on the globe might be not as prominent of a consideration. I was proud to represent the United States at Sharm el-Sheikh at the Climate Summit, and I know the U.S. leadership is going to be critically important. If we tell me the trade-off on time, on the review process, on the environmental impacts such as greenhouse gas emissions being put to the side if we don't have adequate time to review that.
I'll try and be brief. The beauty of NEPA is it allows us to have information, look before we leap, know exactly what the impacts of our project are going to be. If we rush that and are not aware in a changing climate of what the impacts of a project are going to be, then we suffer the consequences. On the resilience side, it means we build infrastructure that then is subject to extreme weather, and we have to rebuild it again in a much shorter time frame. If we're looking at emissions reductions, then we're not taking into account if there's an alternative that would contribute less to extreme weather and causing more climate change. So it's about getting that information so we can plan the best project, have the least amount of impact, engage the community, and then have less objection on the back end, which can slow things down.
Because of lack of time, I cannot ask my last question on the Chesapeake Bay. I know the committee is going to be disappointed I don't raise the Chesapeake Bay at this hearing. I'll yield back.
Senator Cardin, thanks very much for those questions, for your brevity, and for your kind words about earlier about the work that we've done on our committee with respect to the divisions that you face in